Hi there. We're going to be talking about the Constitution today. We're going to be talking about carpetbaggers and scalawags with an eye towards the civil rights movement and the relationships thereof. And the biggest topic is, what should we be afraid of? We're going back to the old format. Years ago, I had an idea to come up with, shall we say, clever, humorous, possibly, things that I could talk about in the world today, stuff that we all see and we all do. Try to go a little lighter on the politics. As I said before, I was boring myself. Oh, and by the way, in case you're wondering where the show was last week, it wasn't done because on Monday, that would have been May 12th, I believe, we had a 17,800 cubic feet per minute of rain, which exceeded Hurricane Sandy by 2,000 cubic feet per minute, and much of it ended up in our basements. So I had a bit of a job to do, and I just finished basically cleaning up yesterday, the last vestiges, if you will. So I wasn't really in the mood, let's say, to do a show. My mood was a bit dampened by the situation. So that being said, we move on. Oh, and by the way, for all you people out in North Olmsted, I understand your plight, and I feel bad for you because we experienced the same problems you did in many ways with all the water in our basements, but storming City Hall and screaming at the mayor isn't going to change anything. That storm was a once-in-a-100-year occurrence, and I don't think there's a city or area or region out there that can prepare itself for something like that. When you've got that much water falling in that many places, there's no place for it to go. So I'm sorry, but we in Lorraine were a little more civilized, and we take it and we move on. And we may not like it, but we can't blame the city. Okay? I just hope they don't make us pay a sewer bill for all that runoff. Be that as it may, we move on. All right, I warned you. We're going to talk about carpetbaggers and scalawags. Okay. It wasn't long ago that I was listening to some people speaking to the issue of the civil rights movement and the Ku Klux Klan, and once again trying to blame the right wing, the Republicans, the Tea Party people, for the racism that exists in this country to this day. Now, racism is an undercurrent nowadays, as opposed to being the law of the land in many situations. However, it still exists on both sides. And in particular, you know, you have to look at the NAACP, for instance, versus the Congress of Racial Equality, or black members of the Tea Party, or black Republicans. According to the NAACP, though they aren't black, the black Republicans aren't black, the black conservatives aren't black, they're Uncle Toms, they're sellouts, and so forth. NAACP recently awarded Donald Sterling and found out that he was a racist, according to their standards, and withdrew the award and gave it to Al Sharpton, who's one of the biggest racists this country has ever produced. But to move on, again, I don't want to get heavy into the politics. The big thing that hit me was that this particular black speaker said that the Ku Klux Klan was a Republican creation. Nothing could be further from the truth. After the Civil War, the Republicans ran the winning country, if you will. The Republicans ran the United States under Abraham Lincoln, and the Democrats started the Ku Klux Klan down in the South in order to keep the blacks in their place after they were freed, to make sure that the blacks didn't think that they actually were equal. The Democrats fought vehemently for Jim Crow laws and various violent, intimidating, terrorist actions against the black population, which had yet to figure out exactly what to do with freedom. That isn't to say that the Republicans were angels in this situation. They weren't, because they ran most of the legislatures in the South. But the South, for decades and decades, voted solidly Democrat, if anyone thinks back a bit. Reason being that they had to maintain the racial status quo. Only later on did the South begin to vote Republican, when they found out that the Democrats were exploiting them and that their ideas about racism and segregation and so forth were going to become dangerous to their continued existence. Well, anyway, carpetbaggers and scalawags. Because carpetbaggers and scalawags were brought up in the same context with the Ku Klux Klan. Kind of an indication that they wanted to blame the Republicans for everything. Well, according to the History Channel, which is, I should say, fairly objective, carpetbaggers were people who went down south after the Civil War in order to take advantage of the economic disabilities therein and prosper. They bought up property. They, let's see, what did they do here? They tried to gain control over their surroundings. They wanted to make money from cotton. They wanted to, the upside is they wanted to revitalize the Southern economy, but at the expense of the people who originally had that economy going. The really important thing to remember here is that carpetbagging and scalawags were an economic concept, not a racial concept. Carpetbaggers weren't down there to help the blacks or hurt the blacks. Scalawags weren't in place to help the blacks or hurt the blacks. It was an economic thing, and it was basically being fought out amongst the white population. The white population of the South had it in for the white population of the North coming down and taking over. It's that simple. Your Democrats ran your local governments for the most part, and the Republicans ran the state legislatures. So we can talk all we want about segregation and so forth, but most of it was on the local level. And the fact that the state legislatures didn't really do anything about it was their fault, so to speak, but yet it was carried out on a local basis. The Ku Klux Klan was a racial organization and a political organization. The Democrats got together and had to put something together to combat the carpetbaggers and the scalawags. And what was a scalawag, by the way? A scalawag was anyone who sympathized with the carpetbaggers, with the Republicans. After Lincoln was assassinated, Andrew Johnson became president. He wasn't prepared for that. And what happened was that the original Reconstruction ideas were thrown out, and new Reconstruction laws were passed. And the scalawags, Southern white Republicans, scalawags, the, let's see here. Okay, okay, we move on. The carpetbaggers and the scalawags basically wanted to follow the new Reconstruction policies. They figured it was easier to go along with it than to try to fight it. It's that simple. Now, there's a little did you know here. Did you know that African Americans made up the overwhelming majority of Southern Republican voters during Reconstruction? Beginning in 1867, they formed a coalition with the Carpetbaggers, 1/6 of the electorate, and Scalawags, 1/5, to gain control of Southern state legislatures for the Republican Party. So, naturally, the African American population wanted to go along with those who wished to reconstruct the South in the image of Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation. Not go back to the way it was, where they were slaves, where they had no rights, where they had no say in the politics. So, again, it was an economic issue that became a political issue when the Ku Klux Klan was formed. So we want to clear that up. That wasn't a Republican invention for the sake of keeping the blacks down. Indeed, it was an economic situation that they created in order to try to benefit from the misfortunes of the South who lost the war. And generally, when one country loses to another country in a war, the victorious country reaps the benefits. To the victor go the spoils. Whether we like war or not is not the issue here. When it happens the way it happens. It's human nature. The Ku Klux Klan was a democratic organization. And we don't know what it is today. It's a lot of people, I'm sure, and they may not consider themselves Democrats or Republicans because they're against anyone who's for equality under the law and equality of rights, and against anyone who isn't a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant or whatever the case may be. But who cares? They're a vast minority. And despite the fact that the country's being run by a vast minority right now, they're a small enough minority that they basically can be ignored. So what can we draw from all of this? Okay, what we have to draw from all of this is that we need to stop listening to people who are using history to prove a point. And why do I say that? Well, because for the most part, they're rewriting history to make their point. They're changing the context. They're trying to put today's political parties and today's political movements in the same context as 150 years ago. And you can't do that because things are different now. We don't have slaves anymore. Haven't had them for a long time. Segregation is not the law of the land anywhere. And everyone has equal rights under the law as long as they're a legal United States citizen. And everyone has equal opportunity. Whether they choose to take advantage of it or not depends upon who they listen to in terms of being told what their status is. We've been over that subject, so I won't go over it again. Another interesting sidebar to this whole thing, I was watching something yesterday regarding the history of the civil rights movement, and it pointed out something that I never thought about, and it made it all more interesting. Many of the early civil rights leaders in the modern era, as you say, in the 20th century, came out of World War II. And what do I mean by that? Well, you had a bunch of black soldiers who were in black units, and segregation in the Army was fierce. Racial tension in the Army was fierce. It wasn't talked about because we were winning, and because you didn't talk about the Army that way. You didn't talk about the military that way back then. They were honorable. They didn't do things like that, but they did. And when we occupied Germany, we made friends of the German people. Well, part of the reason was because the African Americans. The Germans basically hadn't seen that many African Americans. And the African Americans tended to identify with the Germans simply because they were downtrodden in this country, and they did not want to see the Germans get downtrodden in their own country. So they basically treated the Germans with respect, and the Germans treated them with respect. There was an undercurrent of racism, but because the American soldiers were the occupiers, nothing much was said to them. and the Germans took them in stride, so to speak. So in Germany, they were allowed to come and go as they pleased, date white women, marry white women, go into any club, any facility, as they said, any retail establishment, whatever the case may be, freely, knowing full well that when they came back to this country, that would not be the case. A lot of white girlfriends, if you will, were left behind because they didn't dare bring them back here. If they lived in Mississippi, if they lived in Alabama, if they lived in Georgia, in fact, if they lived just about anywhere, they would be browbeaten, persecuted, perhaps even violently assaulted for having a white woman on their arm. Now, some of the gentlemen did come back with white wives, and to this day they were talking to some of them who were still surviving, and, you know, the wives and the husbands, and they're perfectly happy, and they don't see anything wrong with what they did, and there isn't anything wrong with what they did. But the point is, they came back to a country who didn't want them. And they came back to a country who didn't appreciate their efforts. They came back to a country which was going to, again, brutally assault and or murder these men for the fact that they actually had the nerve to think that they earned anything by going over to Europe and risking their lives in World War II. Now, Medgar Evers was one of the men who came out of that movement. And he was a major civil rights leader because they felt, and rightfully so, hey, if we can go over there and be treated equally, why can't we be treated equally in our own country? So the modern civil rights movement got its start there. It didn't get its start by telling people they were oppressed. It didn't get its start by telling people that they had no opportunity. It didn't tell people that they had no way of advancing, that they had to go on the system and live off the government because the government owed it to them due to slavery and due to past segregation laws. They came over here to prove what was right. They fought for this country. They died for this country. They were citizens of this country. And they richly deserved every right and every opportunity that everyone in this country should have. And they've got it. But you got people like the NAACP out there telling them that they're still downtrodden and they're still oppressed and they still have no opportunity and they still have to fight tooth and nail every day against the white man and the Jew and the Republican and the Tea Party member for the fact that everyone's trying to take their rights away. We haven't got time for that. Well, why do we want to take anyone's rights away? All of our rights are being taken away. We have to fight for everyone's rights. It isn't just a civil rights movement anymore. It's a movement of we the people against the government who would propose to tell us how to run our lives. And little by little by little, they're doing it. And we'll get a little bit more into that when we get into what we should be afraid of. Well, this is really what I wanted to do the show about last week, obviously. What should we be afraid of? Okay, what should we be afraid of? Well, I'll tell you what. On the serious side, we should be afraid of government using possible terrorism to reduce our rights. Where am I coming from there? Well, I've said this before. I believe that somewhere along the line, the government is going to cause a problem that's going to give them the ability to establish martial law, to basically start telling us where to go, what to do, and how to do it in every aspect of our lives. The government has already, the president has already signed executive orders to that effect, that can be done. It's a fact. It's been done. And everybody says it's never going to happen here. Well, back in Germany, they said it would never happen there. Okay, in Russia in 1917, they said it would never happen there. In Venezuela, they said it would never happen there. In Cuba, they said it would never happen there. In China, they said it would never happen there. So when we turn ourselves off, when we insulate ourselves from the warnings, 2008, down south, tornado outbreak. Many people died because of the warnings in the past that didn't produce tornadoes. So they decided it's not really a tornado, but it was. Okay? The boy who cried wolf, if you will. Everyone's out there warning, many people, I should say, are out there warning us about various conspiracies. What do we need to be afraid of? Okay, we need to be afraid of Armageddon, the Nostradamus effect. We need to be afraid of aliens. We need to be afraid of the New World Order. We need to be afraid of the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderbergers, the Masons, the Illuminati. Okay, why? Well, throughout history, people have always felt that there was some controlling force that they weren't aware of. And sometimes they were right. Many times they were wrong. But let's face it, nothing happens unless someone makes money. The economic downturns, the crop failures, famine, someone's making money off of all this. War, obviously people make money off of that. Who makes money off of that? And how much money do they make? And because money is considered power in this world, the more money they have, the more power they can acquire. So, do we have something to worry about? Absolutely. Exactly what is it? Well, misinformation is the king. Okay, misinformation is the way that any movement, government, organization uses in order to screen out those they don't want to have around, and in order to keep people from, obviously, from being aware of what they're doing. They give you so many different ways that it could be happening that you don't know which one to believe. Okay, there are people out there who believe that the government is already in league with alien civilizations from out of this world in order to decide who runs the world when the aliens come. In the meantime, you got people saying that the aliens will come and destroy us, and that the aliens will come and help us. Or that the aliens are somehow interbreeding with us in order to produce a race of beings that can be used for whatever purposes the aliens may have. And that there's a group of people in this world who have so much power that they believe that they'll be in charge when the aliens come. X-Files. Remember X-Files? There are people out there who believe that the government, the world government, is being set up as we speak. That all countries will be under one currency and one government. That ties into religious beliefs that there'll be an antichrist who will rule the world for a short time. Claim to bring peace, in the meantime bringing war and disease and pestilence and famine. There are people out there who believe that there's a group of individuals who want to control the world's population by introducing diseases, famines, economic downturns, mass murder, whatever it takes, because the earth can't support the population it has. There are people out there who believe that one day will be taken over by the wealthy. And the banks don't even count. That the world's economies have to cave because they won't be able to survive. There are people out there who believe that our government is setting up concentration camps. FEMA camps. That the Marines are training in a fake city in Virginia on how to control urban populations during civil disobedience. And then the question is always asked, well, what will that disobedience be about? When are they planning on springing all of this? I just saw a post on Facebook recently about thousands and thousands and thousands of disposable coffins being stored in fields in Georgia and being moved to various FEMA camps, about doctors being taken to Georgia to be trained how to work in FEMA hospitals. Why? What do they expect? And now all of a sudden you've got people saying it's going to be a pandemic, it's going to be martial law, it's going to be this, it's going to be that. Well, to be honest with you, with the way our technology is going and the way things are heading at the present time, and with human nature being that of trying to make money off of everything, any of those possibilities could be true. Or none of those possibilities could be true. If we believe in God, then we believe that He has a plan and there's nothing we can do to change that. And if the end is going to come, it'll come when it comes, and there's nothing we can do about it. Meanwhile, there's people out there thinking they can profit from the end. Okay, back to the Illuminatus trilogy, those books I read back in the early 70s. So what do we have to be afraid of? Well, I say we have to be afraid of the fact that we're being given, again, so much information that we can't make up our own minds anymore. So I say stick to a belief that the world will go the way the world is supposed to go. Again, that there was a plan, there is a plan, and that we don't have any control over that plan, but it isn't people who are going to cause it. You know, the universe is going to go its own way. The world is going to go its own way. Survival of the fittest. We as a species will survive in the way that the environment allows us to survive. All this global warming nonsense and climate change and climate chaos and whatever they want to call it is all perfectly normal. And there's nothing we can do to make it different. It's going to happen. Things are going to happen. Disasters are going to occur. Storms, volcanoes, earthquakes. All of these things are part of this world's evolution. The planet's evolution. Not ours. We either evolve or perish. We either adapt or perish, just like any other species. And I'm not looking at that as a fatalistic view. I'm happy for the life I have. And my beliefs happen to think that I might have a life afterwards, and I hope it's a good one. But I don't know. And I can't worry about it per se. I just have to recognize that it may exist and move on. And stop letting the politicians tell me where I'm going or how I got there. I'm the only one who knows. You're the only one who knows. To continue. Okay. On a more humorous note, we have to worry about all the drug companies coming up with new drugs, the side effects including death. Did you ever, how many of those commercials have you seen? How many things do you think are wrong with you because of the commercials you've seen? How many times have you thought, should I go to the doctor because I have this symptom or that symptom? Maybe I need this drug or that drug? And then you find out that the side effects are worse than the illness that you presumably have. You know, what do they call it? Rare but serious side effect that may result in death. So, all right, I have this condition, whatever it may be, AFib or something like that, and or arthritis. There's a good one, okay. So I'm going to take this pharmaceutical drug here, and it's going to cause me to have nausea, headaches, and possible deadly side effects. I heard a song one time. I wish I could get a copy of it. Of course, if I put it on my video, YouTube's going to slam me for it. But basically what it said is, you can do anything you want. You can take all the vitamins in the world. You can work out. You can be fit. You can be all these things, beautiful and young looking and all that, but we're all going to die. We're all going to die, folks. It doesn't make any difference what you do or what you think you can do or how you want to, what drugs you take or what workouts you use or how many ripped six-packs you've got or whatever the case may be. You're going to die. Something's going to take you. We are not immortal. We are not immortal. Not in a physical sense. Not in this world's sense. You can believe anything you wish about what happens after we quote-unquote die, but the physical existence that we enjoy right now has to come to an end at some point. All right? It doesn't matter what you do. Now, there are those who bring it about prematurely, for themselves or others. There are those who can prolong it to a point. Medical science has improved. Our life expectancy is longer, partly because of evolution and partly because of science. But we're all going to die. It's that simple. I don't like it any more than the next person. I'm at a point now where it's a lot closer than I'd like to think. Not that there's anything particularly wrong with me now, in a physical sense. But we have to be afraid because we've got a bunch of people out there who are making an awful lot of money by convincing us that there's something wrong with us. And how do we know that what they're prescribing as a cure isn't worse than the illness that it's supposed to cure or the condition that it's supposed to correct? We don't. We don't. Chantix, a popular non-smoking drug, is actually a form of Wellbutrin, which is a psychoactive drug. So the side effects could have you killing yourself. So you either smoke yourself to death or you commit suicide. There's your choice. You're all going to die. Okay? I've seen commercials now, all these lawsuits for these bad drugs. And the mesothelioma lawsuits and all that, but the bad drug lawsuits. It says that if you've experienced heart conditions or stroke or even death, call this number. Think about that. If you're dead, you better call somebody. All right. Take it with a grain of salt, people. Take it with a grain of salt. Most of us don't want to go to the doctor because we don't want to know what's wrong with us. If we're ill enough to have to go to the doctor, I guess we have to take the consequences. Perhaps we have to take some kind of drug. But even drugs for killing pain and arthritis and so forth could kill you. And we have to be afraid of that. They're getting to the point now where they're developing chemicals that they have no control over, just like they're developing viruses and bacteria that they have no control over. How do we know how many diseases are in the population? Because they got loose from someplace where they were experimenting with genetics. It's possible. My own sister's a biochemist and said she'd never go into that because she was, especially at the CDC, because she was afraid of what they might do or what they might unleash. So one of the things we have to be afraid of is all the drug companies. Okay. Too many advertisements that tell us what's wrong with us without telling us how they can fix it. That's what that boils down to. What should we be afraid of? Okay, we move on. And now it's time for our weekly, or every show at least, foray into the Constitution of the United States of America. We're into the amendments. We've been in the amendments for quite a while now. Hold on one second. There we go. All right. The 20th, 21st, and 22nd Amendment to the Constitution. The 20th Amendment fixes the dates of term commencements for Congress as January 3rd and President January 20th, known as the lame duck amendment, because between those periods of time, the President is, there's a lame duck Congress, basically, exists between the 3rd and the 20th. I'm sorry, the lame duck President exists between the 3rd and the 20th. Okay, well, again, we'll get into the texts of the amendments as they become available later on, but the 21st Amendment repealed the 18th Amendment and prohibits violations of state laws regarding alcohol. In other words, prohibition ended December 5, 1933. February 27, 1951 limits the number of times that a person can be elected president. A person cannot be elected president more than twice, and a person who has served more than 2 years of a term to which someone else was elected cannot be elected more than once, thereby limiting the amount of time that one man can hold the office, which is as it should be. That was the purpose of the Constitution, was limited government, limited federal powers, checks and balances, something that we're losing sight of because we're being told that it's old-fashioned or cumbersome. It takes too long to do things the right way. Let's just get her done. Okay. We've reached the point in this week's episode where we are at the end of it. If you are the man, that's who I am. You can contact this show at hdt2010@roadrunner.com. You can check the show out on the heresdathing.com Facebook page. You can watch us on Google and YouTube, Google Plus and YouTube. And we sincerely hope that you participate by posting things, saying things, sending comments, and your ideas. Here's the thing. Because my opinion, like yours, is that damn important. The important thing about it is that I'm putting my opinion out there. Are you willing to do so? There is no opinion that isn't important. Because my purpose isn't to tell you what to think, it's to tell you why you're thinking it. I can't tell you you're wrong. You may not always be right, but you're never wrong. So, with that, Stopity Productions, along with WELB-DBJ Radio, has proudly brought you this edition of Here's the Thing. If you are the man, that's who I am, and in my own inimitable way, I will say to you, have a good day, have a good week, have a good life. Come back and see me next week, provided there aren't any floods, for the next edition of Here's the Thing. You may even be a part of it.